Welcome to Cats and Rats Podcast, covering your Florida Panthers.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of the Cats and Rats Podcast, episode number 23, the Swaggy edition. Carter Verhage here, joined by my co-hosts here today, Cody Stevens and Nick Levine. I'm Kirby Lupel, of course. We've got to kind of throw to Nick here, I think. First,
Nick is back, baby. Let's go.
Nick's back. He's been away. Nick's debut on the video here.
Here we go.
Let's see Nick. There we go.
Look at the handsome mug on that fella right there. If I were you on Spotify,
on our YouTube channel side, because we're doing video now for everyone listening.
Yeah, if you're on Spotify, switch to see Nick's handsome.
Here we go.
Oh, guys, I heard Spotify has video now.
Oh, do they?
So yeah, you can catch the video there on Spotify. Is that right, Nick?
I have no idea.
I believe so. There was when I was listening to one of the previous episodes, I think it was the one with Vince. By the way, great job on that, guys, and great job to Vince. Did a phenomenal job. I think there was like an option to like play video, but like usually I'm outside the app when I'm listening and it was like glitching. So, but I do think there is an option for video.
Yeah, but shout out to Vince, draft nerd. That's such a skill issue, if you ask me. Such a draft nerd.
Cody, you want to start us off here?
Yeah, Nick. But Nick,
lots to catch up here.
But for those who don't know, Nick was on like a 2-week cruise around the world.
Anything new, guys? Anything different from then when I last was on an episode, or no?
Yeah, we went from being a catastrophic collapse to being champions within a week. But here's the funny thing, Nick. You were on a boat for Game 7. What was it like watching Game 7 on a boat?
Well, I'll say this. So I'll just tell the full story. There's a 6-hour time difference, right? I went to bed at 10 o'clock at night so I can, because I had a tour at the next stop that morning at 7 a.m. and to be off the ship at 7 a.m. for a tour, right? And so I go to bed at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m., get sleep. I wake up at 2 a.m. and I'm like waking up and I'm like trying to find the remote because I'm like, holy, you know what? Like, this is it, right? And it was the NHL Network feed that you usually see with E.J. Raddick and Kevin Weeks. It was the international coverage on the TV, on the cruise TV. I don't even remember the name of the network, but we were scrambling when we got on the boat trying to figure out how can we watch the game. Luckily, it was on the television in the room. So I turn on the TV. The first thing I see is, the national anthem. I'm like, here we go. And then I see Roberto Luongo all fired up, and I'm starting to get fired up. But I got to be quiet because everybody else is sleeping in the cabin. So game starts. We get a quick one off the bat. I'm like, yes, I feel good. And me and Kirby had actually spoke earlier that day. I was feeling pretty confident about, where we were at that point. I know, Cody, you called me delusional in one of the episodes. Delusionally confident, but
I called you positive think tank. That's
yes, but I actually was confident. I really was. I thought we had a chance, and so we went. Obviously, the game started. Verhage gets that first one, and as I was trying to be quiet the whole time because obviously it's 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And that whole game was just unbelievable because I think it's Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Final. You're trying not to take moral victories. All right, good. You want to win them, but I was like thinking, okay, we get the first goal, and at the end of the first period, I was relatively happy. Fast forward to the third period, it's driving me insane how many icings how many times we're icing the puck. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I broke my remote because I threw it because of the amount of ice.
That's Paul Maurice hockey, Cody.
I know, but it's
I know, but when you're double shifting me David Draisaitl against our tired fourth line, I'm gonna be kind of mad.
Bobrovsky makes that save. I think it's Lostereen gets a block on it.
Oh yeah.
And I said this on the Spaces right after we won the cup. I'm like, in my head, I'm not trying to get too ahead of myself. I'm like looking at the clock. I'm like 7 minutes away. There's like, here you go. But it's like, you don't want to get your heart broken. So you're just trying to stay in the moment. As soon as Lostereen and Bobrovsky combined to prevent that puck from going in, it just reminded me of like one of those moments where I'm like, I think we got this. And it really hit me when there were 20 seconds left on the clock. And I think it's Bouchard behind the net. And I start getting up, I start jumping up and down. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I see the puck going in the corner. And the first thing I see, I just sit down on the bed. And the first thing I see is Sam Reinhart right in front of Bob, throw his glove up in the air. I'm just sitting there. I'm like, I'm in awe. I can't believe it. It's surreal. You're seeing all this, just everything like you've seen. Like, I've been a hockey fan for, since 2011, right? Kirby, you've been a hockey fan for pretty much your whole life. Same with Cody. And, we've seen this celebration, and to finally see everybody throw the gloves off and the helmets off and, have the trophy presentation, it was unbelievable. And I remember calling you guys right after, because I was close enough to the port where I'm like, okay, I think I could call them. And I didn't even care if I was getting charged overseas feed. Yeah, I did not care.
The data roaming.
I did not care. I called you, and I'm like, let's go. And it was just an unbelievable moment.
We ran that little trick on our post-game show.
Yeah.
Kirby just come in, read the box score, very monotone fashion.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a regular season game in November.
And it's like, it's like the crazy thing is, because I have the Stanley Cup final puck right here for those. Shout out Caneswear. But yeah, it's just like, I knew you were overseas, and I guarantee you probably couldn't go to sleep after that game. Like,
well, I couldn't go to sleep because it was 6 a.m. and I had to get on a tour.
Yeah, but you had energy for that day.
Oh yeah,
I think he was praying at the Vatican in Game 5.
Yeah, so interesting story. I was at the Vatican the Sunday. I think it was like the day after we lost Game 6.
Oh,
I think no. It was so. Again, 2 a.m. Italy time for the game. Watch Game 6. It was awful. I was at the Vatican, I think that day or the day after, around 10 a.m. And I'm like, listen, it's worth the shot, right? I started praying, and, it's just unbelievable, because I say it casually now, right? But like seeing Alexander Barkov lift the cup, I mean, it's something that seems so casual now, but if you would have told me that just 2-3 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to stop talking about it, right?
Nick, the one that got me, and I said this on the podcast previously on our post-game show, I said obviously the one that's going to get me is Luongo, but I didn't see it live because we were going live on our post-game show. But the one that got me was Dmitry Kulikov in the moment. That one really got me. Where I think OEL was the one that passed it off.
I'll say this. I was a little bit surprised about the order they handed it off in. I was thinking it was going to be Aaron Ekblad. Not that Bobrovsky's a bad choice, but then it kind of went in a weird order. Obviously, Okposo deserves it, but then it goes to
which again, Kachuk might have proposed that order.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I'm just thinking Ekman, Larson, and Kulikov get it before Aaron Ekblad.
How about Tarasenko before Montour and Forsling?
So it's obviously just an unbelievable season, an unbelievable 2 years. Considering where we were. Just a year and a half ago, I think it was in January of 2023, right? We were like, what has happened to this team? And, we're back-to-back Eastern Conference champs, and we are Stanley Cup champs, and it's a great feeling. And for the next year, nobody's going to ever be able to take it away from us. And for the next year, all the commercials, all the marketing, when they're talking about the defending Stanley Cup champion, it's going to be that Florida Panther logo right next to it. And that, to me, I got sick and tired of watching the Vegas, defending Cup champs here and that the whole year. Well, that's going to be us, and I'm going to enjoy this year. I really am.
But
Cody, before we kind of segue to either development camp or our signings, I want to share something with our audience here. We're going to be doing a new Cats and Rats giveaway here. This is from Eric Poole, that's on Twitter and Instagram. ePoole, POOLE88. He sent me some of my own very complimentary prints. I'm going to be tweeting these out. So here's the Stanley Cup one with the rat here. Make sure to follow him on Twitter and Instagram. And then here's the other one. I don't know which ones we're giving away for the giveaways, but we're going to have 2 or 3 separate giveaways throughout the offseason here and leading up to opening night. And then here's the one I really like, the mascot one. If you guys are watching on our YouTube channel here right now, so make sure to check it out over there. Again, it's ePoole, POOLE88 on X, and then on Instagram as well. So shout out to Eric there.
Yeah, but now segueing, because shout out Eric, amazing work. Those look phenomenal. And just hopping over, I mean, Kirby in Siberia, basically, Calgary. I know he hates the word Siberia.
They got a new rink coming. the newest rink in the NHL.
Thank God.
Western Canada is going to have
Saddle
Hamilton
Dome
rink, which is probably the Oilers rink number 1 in the NHL, guys. The Flames, which is going to be right up there. People are going to say Edmonton one still might be better. We'll see. And then the Seattle one, Climate Pledge Arena, is pretty new as well, I think. And I've heard good things about that. So.
Well, the northwest part of the region, a.k.a. the 3 biggest losers with the 3 best stadiums. Sweet. But segue it, like, me back in Tallahassee, Nick here had the opportunity to go to the open scrimmage for Panthers development camp. And just, Nick, could you give us a rundown how you felt?
Well, I'll say this, that the amount of people there wearing Panther gear, I mean, you could tell, like, this is different at the brand new practice facility in Fort Lauderdale, which I've been to a couple times, but, it was really a cool event, great for the fans to be there. All the media was there, people were talking about our prospects, and, a lot of discussions I overheard, really talk in-depth conversations about these prospects and their development, which was, pretty impressive. There's a lot of people talking about, Florida fans don't know hockey. Well, conversations I've had and I overheard with other people seem that they do know their hockey. So I just wanted to say that first. But yeah, look, as the prospect, I'm not a huge prospect guy. I'm not following these guys as extensively as, Vince was, but I actually went with Vince. And, I'll say this, like, I thought Grayson Sachin was a guy that stood out to me, guy that's kind of been heralded as like the next third line center. Although after talking with Vince, he says he could probably transition to wing because he does like Linus Eriksson, our newest 2nd round pick. But as far as notable guys, I thought Jack Devine and Grayson Sachin were by far the best guys there. Everybody else, was kind of just blended in with the crowd or, really wasn't that good. Except one guy, the professional player from the Czech League is Havroka.
Oh, yeah. The guy we signed out of the LC.
Yeah, he's a big guy. You could tell he was a professional player. There was some promise there. He's 23 years old. He's older than a lot of the guys there. But we'll see. I mean, I don't know if it's just him standing out in a group where he's one of the older guys or if, he really was that good. We'll see. But no doubt in my mind, Sachin and Devine were there. As far as the layout of how it was 3 15-minute periods. The first 5 minutes were 5-on-5 of each period. Then it went to 4-on-4 for the next 5. For the final 5, it went to 3-on-3. And then it went to a 3-round shootout at the end of each period. So there were 6 goalies total, 3 on each team. Everybody got a chance to look. Again, it was a nice experience. It was pretty cool seeing all the prospects there, more importantly, seeing all the fans there. So, outside of a handful of guys, I guess you could say, like Devine or Sachin, nothing really else that stuck out to me. Although, it was just good to be back here in Florida after a long time away.
Yeah, that's pretty synonymous where I think our prospect system is, Kirby. I think you would agree with me on that one. Being a perennial playoff contender, your prospect system is not going to be the greatest.
Yeah, it doesn't. And, there's a lot of pressure off of you. And, sure, that's going to segue into the next topic about the signings and, the importance of
just before the signings, Nick, just to piggyback off of you there, I really think Mackey's got to earn that top 9 spot coming out of camp. You've got Sachin maybe the following year. You also have sort of this year that will battle with Mackey, different role deployment, Cody, but also the defense. Maybe they're not ready yet with the Evan Nosses and
Mike Bennings. Matt Bennings in where the hell? I think he's in San Jose.
Michael Benning. I gotta call Michael because then I don't get Matt and Mike crossed up.
How do you get Matt and Mike mixed up?
Yeah, I don't know. I just did there. Just on the spot there. I don't usually.
One has an I and E. One has an A and 2 T's. Like
I don't usually. Hey, relax. We don't have Vince on here today. They're teaming up on me there the other day. We do have a Canadian later on this episode that's going to join me. So it's nice that I'm always getting teamed up here with all you guys, you Americans and stuff like that.
I mean, just say pasta and we'll be good. But
but yeah, you agree with that, right, Cody? Like we need to have someone maybe pop in camp that we don't expect defensive wise, but we now have enough depth that you're going to get into.
Yeah, I think could push for a 13th forward spot, if you ask me. Just because he plays the way Maurice likes, fast, physical, could play on the defensive end. Like he's a guy that I think a push for play NHL spot this year. I think next year he could be more of an NHL regular.
He can jump over Lockwood or Asplin in the camp this year, or last year they kind of got some run there.
Yeah. And then, I'm a defense guy, and I watched the AHL quite a bit last year. People watch the AHL because of Spencer Knight. I was too, just to see it where he was at. And I'm not gonna lie, I thought Spencer Knight looked fine. I think he'll be perfectly fine in the NHL. The first few games may be rough, or he may have that really good game because he's just coming back, have a little downswing, whatever. But I think he'll be fine. But I don't think any of the defense are ready for the NHL quite yet. Mike Benning's probably the best of all of them. But the biggest thing is,
what point of the year he had a good second half last year, but struggled early on. So hopefully he's more like in the second half.
And I do believe he's right shot, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you are right. Yep. And we lost our other one as of today on this recording. Santu Kinnunen, I think signed overseas with the Lions or whatever.
He wasn't going to make the roster. Yeah. He was at 2.
We don't have a lot of right-handed D, but he wasn't going to make.
I mean, I know you're a big right.
Kirby's losing all his guys this offseason.
He nearly lost all of them.
Davie's in camp. Davies, everyone's like they're going to give him another year, but I think Davies and Sachin the following offseason, Cody, watch out.
I think we may be a fourth line powerhouse here in a second, the way we're producing these fourth line prospects.
Well, we need those guys. Zito doesn't pay for those guys anyways. You see Cousins still out there. Lawrence, I don't think has signed as
I mean, this is a perfect segue because I can't believe this is the thing, but this is how Bill Zito does it. I think the Panthers are the only, one of the only teams who did not pay more than $1 million for any of their free agents. Not one.
You might be right. I think
not one of them got more than $1 million. The most expensive one was what? Greer, $875 or something. I think Greer got.
He's one like we said last week on the podcast, got the 2-year deal.
Yeah, he got like $850, $875 somewhere. I know Schmidt got $800. No, Schmidt got $775. Boquist got, well, I guess I got to differentiate them now. I think both of them got the same thing. The Boquist brothers now that we have them both. Because I think for those, because, Nick hasn't been here, but we've been keeping it just the last couple of weeks, and I think all three of us are the most intriguing sign for all of us this offseason was Adam Boquist, just because of the untapped potential and what he could be, and especially he's a right shot, so we don't have to have 5 left-handed shot D this year, like as we started last year with 0 right-handed shot D.
Cody, you're right. Both Boquist brothers $775K.
Oh, dude.
1-year deals, I believe so.
I'm like a human calculator. Remember these numbers, but what do you guys think about Adam Boquist? Because I have some hope for him, especially because remember this is the first team he's actually going to come to and actually be good, because he's been on some train wrecks.
I sent out a tweet on it before you jump in here, Nick. I saw him play a lot with Duncan Keefe with some extended highlight packages that I was watching. Also on the ice for 3-on-3 overtime, so that's a little thing to monitor and watch for. And obviously, I think you're probably going to mention he can get some PP one time. Moves the puck very well. Good cross-seam pass distributor. Really great finish. He's got a really dynamic half clapper. Which is a half wrist shot, between a wrist shot and a slap shot. I think probably one of the best ones on our team for velocity. I can't speak on accuracy a lot, Nick, until we break down the film a little bit more. I think he played with Eric Goodbranson too, that Cody mentioned last week. So he's played with a lot of different style of defensemen. Cody, I see you giving the thumbs down on the video. Third pairing, but I saw him play quite a bit with Duncan Keefe, so this is promising. I don't know if it's ambitious to say, but maybe he plays with his fellow countrymate Gustav Forsling next season, depending on what happens with Aaron Ekblad there. But you're going to think probably on that middle pairing with Mikkola. I don't think he's a Brandon Montour replacement, especially when you talk minutes and role. And what Brandon Montour did in the defensive zone, that's some of the drawbacks when you get into Adam Boquist. I talked to someone that actually followed the Columbus Blue Jackets, traveled with them on the road. He's really weak kind of below the dots and behind the net, and that's going to be a problem in Maurice's system. But there's a lot of pluses here for what contract he's on, Nick. So what are you kind of seeing Adam Boquist here?
Well, like you said, I think we'd have to review some more game film on him before I can kind of give a clear thought or opinion. But this is a guy that, we talked about prior to July 1st, a guy that I said I think there's too much talent on him for him to be passed up. His former top 10 pick. He was really, highly regarded prospect in Chicago, as far as what I know about him, which is not a ton as of right now, he's a really good skater. He's an excellent puck mover. One of the things that I've seen that a lot of people talk about is he said he's got a great shot. And that seems to be like one of the main things about him. I do want to mention your point on, because where I stand on, below the hash marks, along the walls. I think that's part of our game. It's one of the reasons we are successful, and we need to continue to do it to be successful. I think that kind of like how you saw with Oliver Ekman-Larsson, take on more of a physical role on this year, right? A lot of people were surprised by that, and it's part of the reason he landed in Toronto, and he was highly regarded among sports media, really bounced back. At times, I think they were overrating him a little bit, but, that's another conversation. I think Adam Boqvist is a guy, I'll say this. For the first time in a while, we were coming into this offseason. I'm like, I'm concerned about the defensive scoring, the scoring on our defense, right? Which is a far cry from where we have been in the past. But, obviously with Aaron Ekblad aging, we don't know how his game's going to change. Gustav Forsling is going to have to take a much bigger role. We'll see if he can do that. Brandon Montour is a significant loss. Like you said, I don't think we have a clear Brandon Montour replacement just yet. I think Schmidt is a perfect OEL replacement, right? And Nate Schmidt's a phenomenal skater, and I think Adam Boqvist is as well. I think when you win a Stanley Cup, there is pressure taken off of you, right? And I think it can't hurt to have talented young players, and particularly when we have a weak prospect system, have a guy like Adam Boqvist come in and see what he can do, right? I'm not going to say he's going to become the next Gustav Forsling, right? Because all we know, he could become the next Nils Lundqvist, who's in Dallas and is playing 5-7 minutes a night. We don't know, right? But it's a no risk, potentially high reward move. I mean, take a look at what we paid for him, $775 if he does good. We have his restricted. He's a restricted free agent.
No,
right?
He's a UFA. I checked the other day.
Is he?
His expiry status is UFA. But the thing is, with it being $775, if he does good, you can that's all we did with Forsling. Like when Forsling came in, he was probably making the minimum at the time. I really don't remember what he was making. But when he got that little vault, it turned into 3 by 2.5. And then it upped that to the 8-year deal that he's at now. So that's something that could happen with Boqvist,
Cody, did you mention Adam Boqvist? He's an RFA.
When I looked up on Cap,
I'm going by Puckpedia here. He's an RFA.
Well, is he an RFA?
Yeah, both Boqvist brothers.
Yeah, so if he is an RFA, we'll obviously double checking here, but if he is an RFA, it's kind of like a win-win, right? If he doesn't play good, right? Okay, whatever. It's a league minimum defenseman. You put on waivers.
Might not even tender him.
Right? So there's no risk here. And it's a guy with a lot of talent, a lot of skill, former top 10 pick who's still young. And like Cody said,
eighth overall, I think.
Eighth overall. He's been on terrible teams. There's no question about it. And, there was a lot of Columbus is kind of a mess right now when you take a look at the amount of, again, Columbus had a lot of defensemen on the blue line last year. A lot of NHL defensemen who were getting chances. They were rotating in and out, right? Pascal Vincent was fired, although I saw a report they might be rehiring him. That's another discussion.
No. He just got hired by Laval.
Oh, he did? Okay, I didn't see that.
Out. So
Laval.
I don't care, Laval.
I think if you're the Florida Panthers...
Just a shout out to Armando here on the Locked On Panthers Network. I know he didn't grow up in 93, but I had to give him a correction on how to say Guy Carbonneau's name.
But to wrap it up on Adam Boqvist, a great pickup for what he could potentially bring. And, I'm excited to see what he can do. Obviously, I don't know a ton about him, but kind of fitting into the mold of where we're going and what we've done in the past, and the fact that we don't have the best prospect system, like I previously stated, I think it's an excellent move on Zito's part.
But Nick, you're back in the lab this summer with some more Nick's film breakdowns, so make sure you follow Nick on it, because you did some last year on OEL and Mikla, and I think that's a huge W for you, Nick. I was on board with you, but you were really at the forefront of showing the breakdown of some of these players that we were bringing in. I was huge on Erod. You didn't see it in the first half of the year, but if you look back at the Stanley Cup final from start to end of that series, I say he was probably our best player.
I think
so. Again, these were W's by Zito.
Yeah, Mikkola, Stenlund, the guys even that they're not with us anymore. You got a Stanley Cup. They were phenomenal. You maximized your offseason. There was a lot of criticism, and I know Kirby likes.
And Cody was on the OEL one watching a lot of Canucks.
I know Kirby likes to bring up a certain journalist. I won't name him. You can if you want. That didn't even bring up Nico Mikkola in his offseason.
The Athletic, right?
Yeah. And he played top 4 minutes for a team that's the Stanley Cup champion.
And it wasn't like he had to be like Mark Stahl. Like he fit that role.
Yeah,
no, he was a really good top 4. In fact, just if I could talk about all the signings real quick because I wasn't here.
Yeah.
When you take a look at the roster construction as a whole for the Panthers, Nate Schmidt and Adam Boqvist, I think, are solid additions to the blue line. There's obviously depth there. We know Paul Maurice really likes Uvis Belinkis. There was a Tobias Bjornfot, Jacob Megna, although I don't really think he's going to play a factor in this. Yeah. As far as other signings go, Sam Reinhart, I didn't talk about that. That was a phenomenal deal. You got him way below market value. Would have liked it done a year ago, but I'm not going to complain about it now.
Yeah, like
the biggest question mark for me, and Kirby says you don't ever question Bob McKenzie, is when I saw 4 years for Dmitry Kulikov, I'm like, am I reading that right?
Yeah, Bob McKenzie, the Bob father, he's just reporting.
I'm like,
what?
Margarita Bob.
I had to send that to our group chat, guys. I'm like, am I reading that right, or am I like going nuts here? 4 years? We were talking about him retiring or just getting to 1,000 games, and now he's going to be sticking around. I don't know if he'll play out the contract, but it doesn't seem
lifetime achievement contract. I'm like, you didn't have to do that to the guy.
No, yeah, but it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere anytime soon. So on that front, fourth line, just talked about him, Kevin Stenlund. Obviously I'm very disappointed that he's not returning, but 2x2 for him. You get Lomberg in a 2x2. You can't be paying. You can't pay your depth $4 million. You just can't, right?
I don't know.
Calgary's got to play him in the third.
I understand how Stenlund got 2x2, but when I saw Ryan Lomberg,
if you have the money to do it, great. But we don't. We're up against the cap. We know that. And I think Bill Zito, I think he's used this word a lot. He was very prudent in his signings. He was very cautious in who he brought in. I think you take a look at guys like AJ Greer, who I think is going to be a fan favorite. This is a guy high intensity, and I was looking
he's a bit of a leaf killer that I said too.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the quotes he made with Jameson Olive, I believe, and some other podcasts that he appeared on. He seemed to be really excited to be a Panther. You see his Instagram story. He's posting about the Panthers, how excited he is. So it really seems like he's going to be a good fit. Tomas Nosek, I know there's that popular clip of him and Matthew Tkachuk. This is a guy I wanted last year, right? When we were looking about the fourth line center, I was saying, listen, we need to get bigger and we need to get tougher to play against, especially on that fourth line. I talked about minute allocation all year. After we lost to Vegas, that fourth line was a big reason why, and we ended up getting a guy. I wanted Tomas Nosek. Bill Zito got someone even better in Kevin Stenlund. But, I think Tomas Nosek is a guy that's a good physical fourth line center that can win faceoffs and kill penalties. I think he'll be effective in that. I do think there is a skill gap between him and Kevin Stenlund. I don't think he's going to be able to move up the lineup as easily as Kevin Stenlund did. I think that role goes towards more of Jesper Boqvist, who, when you really take a look at it, this is a guy that I think could fit into that bottom six role. And if Samoskevich doesn't take that spot out of training camp, I wouldn't be surprised to see him start on that third line next to Lundell and Lostereen. And he's another guy that is a 36 overall pick, was highly touted, really skilled guy. We'll see what happens. But I think if you take a look at the construction of the roster where we're at right now, I think from here, July 18th to the trade deadline, we're just fine. We're a competitive playoff team. And there's two things. The team is in a position to where they're going to be able to make a move to fill a void. Right now, that void, noticeable void, is a top 4 defenseman. They're going to be able and be in a position to make a move at the deadline for that, and be in a position, if they do that, go on another deep run. That's the way the roster's constructed. It was a good job by Bill Zito, kind of like what we did with the top 9 forward position this past season when we acquired Tarasenko. if we don't make a move, that signals to me that these guys have overperformed their contracts and, they've really fit in well. So I think right now we're good to go. We're getting ready to compete. We're getting ready to be towards the top of the standings. And I think come trade deadline, Bill Zito's going to evaluate, and I trust him that he'll make the right decision. And we're going to be in a position again next season to go on another deep run, especially when you take a look at the rest of the Eastern Conference where they have gone, right? And there's been a lot of changes around. You notice Gensel to Tampa Bay, which we'll talk about later with Rod, I'm sure. But there's, a lot of movement in Carolina. Obviously, Gensel's out of Carolina.
Carolina still got lots to do, though. Because
New York Rangers got Riley Smith. There's some questions about what they're going to do with Jacob Trouba. So, obviously New Jersey, who Kirby's biggest fan, Kirby. Kirby
actually may let them in the playoffs this year.
He actually may let them in the playoffs this year.
I begrudgingly like them a little bit better, but
But again, we don't really know. But what I will say is this: I think the way the roster is constructed, from here into the trade deadline, we're okay. I trust Bill Zito to analyze throughout the season, make the moves we need to go on a deep playoff run. And I'll say it right here, right now. I think it's very possible you might not see our best hockey until playoff time next year.
I'm with
I'm going to be honest, just the way we play and our identity, they could be suited for playoff hockey. Like we've said, it's not necessarily going to mean we're going to be top of the division again, right? But
more new guys to incorporate. It's hard to do that every year.
And again, back-to-back.
No more on the depth, but still.
Again, and
a new goalie in a sense with Knight.
To me, the biggest question is Sergei Bobrovsky. Yep. How does, this many games played affect him, right? Because I think sooner or later, you're going to start to see age
catch up.
Games played wear on guys. I said this.
And that doesn't mean Knight or the guy behind him just comes in perfectly transitions. That's not how it works.
I'll wrap on this. I'll wrap on this. The guys at the beginning of the season are not the same guys they are in January, February, and later on in the season, right? You take a look at Blake Wheeler in Winnipeg. I think he was on a 65-point pace. He got bought out, and then before getting injured, he wasn't even on a 35-point pace. Right?
And like Matt Duchene getting bought out of Nashville.
Matt Duchene is another guy, right? Joe Pavelski had a great year, and then he kind of went on a cold streak at the end of the season and didn't really do anything in the playoffs. So players, JVR, we talked with Matty for the Bruins. He said he kind of fell out of favor as the season went on. So I think it's really possible you see guys with age as the season goes on, they fall out of favor. They do what you need them to do for a certain portion of the season, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the plan going into the playoffs. You're going to forget about players that you had on your team earlier in the year in the playoffs. So that's normal, but I'm excited to see what the season brings us. I trust Zito, and, we'll see what else happens, not only for the Panthers, but around the Eastern Conference in the league.
Yeah.
Cody, anything in closing there before we get to it?
No, I mean, speaking about the Eastern Conference, like if for those of you who are still kind of like in the hockey like paradise right now, just look at Raleigh, North Carolina, because there's going to be some big moves happening over there, because you still have two huge RFAs who have not been re-signed. Martin Necas, the famous light switch as I call them, and then Seth Jarvis still hasn't been re-signed either. And then Boston, look up north, Swayman hasn't been re-signed yet either. So there's still quite a bit of moving around to do here for the Eastern Conference.
We're going to go around the NHL quite a bit here this summer. We're going to have some of our Spaces community members in here. We've got special Friday nights coming up on Spaces, kind of about bi-weekly every other week. We're going to be doing a trivia night with our community, so make sure to come by and join us for that. Of course, those contest giveaways coming that I just alluded to there as well. We've got some fantasy leagues coming up, football and hockey. Caneswear is going to be probably joining us in the fantasy football league. So they're going to have a representation member in our league there. So that's going to be fun this year. I just want to let everyone know, Caneswear, Panthers fever is here. Are you geared up? Caneswear and Davies is a place for all your Florida Panthers needs. They have the latest gear for our favorite NHL team. Jerseys, polos, t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Caneswear has you covered. Stop by their store in Davie or at pantherswear.com. That's pantherswear, wear.com. for all your Panthers gear. And coming up after the break, we're going to be joined by Rod Pedersen here, part of the Cats and Bolts podcast network. So stay tuned.
Cats and Rats podcast. And now, a special segment.
We're pleased to be joined here today with Rod Pedersen, host of the Cats and Bolts podcast. How's it going, Rod?
Good, Kirby. Good to see you again, brother.
Nice to have you on here. I know you've joined us in our post-game spaces show. You joined us last summer with our content creators when we did the Atlantic Division breakdown. I'd like to do that again. So we'll make sure to have you back if we do one of those. But let's get into it right away here, Rod. You're used to interviewing all these greats around the NHL. You're a longtime voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, which is the CFL, the Canadian Football League, if anyone doesn't know that. And you got your start in Weyburn, Saskatchewan. My dad's from there. Now, he's not as big his name as Graham Dillette, but my dad, pretty well known in the junior leagues playing. You had Dale Talon on your show. And my dad was kind of in that draft class, so he played those junior Canadian teams and those teams like that. Actually, he was one game away, I think, from playing the junior Canadians. He's like, I'm glad we didn't play them because we would have lost like 10-2. So my dad played for Regina and with the Lethbridge Sugar Kings, which he actually had Lanny McDonald induct him into the Hall of Fame there in Lethbridge. So I want to know your origin story a bit, Rod, but I also want to know, like, are you a fan of a particular hockey team? You covering the Panthers now? I really want to know that because I always hear you interview people and their story. I want to know your story a bit. So take us back a little bit.
Hey, buddy.
As much detail as you can. And then, like, what hockey teams you kind of followed growing up.
I'll be really brief on that, but I think I met your dad. You bring up my name to your dad. I think I met him at the Lanny McDonald roast in the Saddle Dome a couple of years ago. And I think I sat at the same table as him. So that's clearly a story for another time. But Loophole is, yes, it's a very hallowed name.
Yeah, synonymous in Western Canada a bit.
It is. It is.
Gary Loophole, Joffrey Loophole, my dad Ken, my uncle Dale. So, yeah.
Exactly. So,
cousin.
Listen, I'll skip through all that. As a little kid on the farm in Saskatchewan, I wanted to cheer for Montreal. My dad wouldn't let me. He's like, I forbid you from cheering for the Montreal Canadiens. Pick somebody else. He just hated Montreal. So I cheered for the Oilers all through the 80s. It was pretty good run. And then on August 9th, 1988, they traded Wayne, and I'm like, I'm out. I never cheered for them again. I was 15 years old. And a year later, my dad signed a contract with the Minnesota North Stars as a scout, and he spent the next 26 years with the Dallas Stars as a scout. So that was my team for a long time. And then he retired. I was kind of teamless. My buddy bought the Arizona Coyotes. He owned them for 5 years. Gary Drummond, he was in the Ice Edge Arizona group. And then he sold. I'm like, okay, I'm looking for a team. And then 3 years ago, I ended up moving to Florida and married Serena, obviously my co-host. And so I'm a bit of a vagabond, and I don't apologize for that. My dad in junior worked for like 5 different teams. I'm used to switching allegiances. So I'm loving the Florida. What are you, a Cats fan or a Bolts fan? I get it every day. And I'm like, I'm not picking one. We cover both on our show. You don't have to make me pick one. And so do I love one, or, do I have one? I just love the NHL. And to be honest, Matthew Barnaby is a really good buddy of mine. I asked Barney the exact same question when he was on NHL radio. I said, Barney, who's your team? And he's like, I don't have one. And it makes it real easy to cover 32 teams. Yeah. And I'm like, that's a good point.
Yeah. You see now in Canadian broadcasts, especially, you see more like fans covering, for TSN or Sportsnet, but you still see the ones like Jamie Noodles McLennan that, hopefully we're going to have on our podcast here one day. He's like, I'm not a fan of a particular team. I'm friends with Jerome McGinley, Roberto Luongo. So he has these different connections. He works for the Ottawa Senators. So I like to hear that, bipartisan. But I wanted to ask you that question. I know it kind of leads into your question, Nick, about this kind of magical, 2-year run here by the Panthers. I'm capping it off with the Stanley Cup here.
Well, first of all, Rod, thank you for joining us. It's awesome to have you. One of the first questions I wanted to ask is, for a lot of Panther fans that have been fans for quite a long time here, we haven't really had a lot of success up until last year. And I know, for me at least, as a fan in my life, Panthers have never really been relevant in the media or really, and even here in South Florida. Now, obviously, going back to last year, you see Matthew Tkachuk on NBA on the TNT show. What do you think it means? Well, what does it mean to you, and that the Panthers are finally getting some recognition, not just in South Florida, but, in the sports media world?
Well, I think we're going to find out what it means. Right now, I don't know. It's funny because I've been there 3 years. Matthew Tkachuk's been there 2. Chucky didn't really know what it was like in South Florida not to be successful either. The one thing I remember was going to training camp last September, looking around the ice den and going, there is every shape, size, age, every ethnicity. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, hockey's for everyone. So what I think that did was with the Panthers winning and all the media coverage they're getting. And listen, I do talk to the Panthers regularly. They love all the podcasts there can be, all the coverage there can be. I think they've made it, Nick, cool to be a Panthers fan. It's okay to be a Panthers fan. I mean, if you sit and look at the ethnic diversity breakup, 75% of Miami is Latino, and it's hockey isn't traditionally a Latino sport, but why not? It's because I was sitting at a game early in the season in Sunrise, and somebody goes, Evan Rodriguez, he's from Coral Springs. No, he's from Etobicoke, Ontario. But it's good that you think that. But it's making the Panthers cool for all demographics. Would be my answer to that. But we're going to find out in the years ahead.
Nick, you got anything on that?
Just I could speak to my personal experience. I'm a season ticket holder, and just the buzz around the team, and obviously living in the South Florida, I live in Broward County, and you walk around town, there's Panther flags up. I also go to school in Tampa, so I'm able to kind of contrast, the difference between Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. I remember when I first got to Tampa in 2022, summer of 2022, Tampa Bay Lightning, I actually got there the day that they lost Game 6 to the Colorado Avalanche in the Stanley Cup final. And I just remember going to downtown Tampa in the days after, and even the night of the Stanley Cup final, and you just saw, I think there was this, I forget the name of it, there was just like this Lightning bar, and then there was like the Thunder Walk or something, and just seeing the passion and like the buzz around town. And me being a Panther fan, I know how our season ended that summer. It was not the best thing to see, but I couldn't help but be reminded of that these past 2 years. Just seeing the passion, seeing the bars filled, watching Panther games everywhere you go. Somebody's wearing a Panther hat now, and for years I remember it was the Heat, the Dolphins. Now it's just really cool to see it be Panther fan, especially when I got to Tampa right as their run was ending. So I'd like to take a little bit of credit for that. So
sure, if I can jump in real fast, Bill Lindsay was on our last episode of the season, and Billy said the Panthers are Broward's team. And I thought, like, the Dolphins, every county's team, but I think Dade is more Heat, Broward's more Panthers. It's kind of what you're saying. You see way more Panthers gear around Broward County. And I think he called it, this is Panthers country. He said Broward County. So that's cool. It is what it is. I just think that there's going to be more of that. But we went to a game in February when the Panthers were at Tampa. And I was with my buddy Brent, who's a big Cats and Rats fan, who watches all you guys, watches all you guys shows. We're driving around Tampa going, and he's a season ticket holder of the Panthers. He's like, we got a long ways to go with the Panthers to catch up to this as a hockey town with Go Bolts banners on the downtown office towers, But what you had to do was win. That really was the biggest thing, was win. And they
Ron, remember the scene Stamkos banners when he came in? It was even back then with Tampa.
Yeah.
You hit it on the head when you said they have to win, because South Florida, like, I'm from Miami Gardens, Miami, Florida, grew up there my entire life, and I'm a fan of every team, South Florida, except for basketball, thank God. But it's just, you need to win in this town and win consistently to become a staple, because the Dolphins did in the 70s, and then Marino came in the 80s, and they had their little run in the 90s. They never won anything, but they were consistently good, which is how they built like their loyal fan base. Now the Heat did it 06, and LeBron came 12, 13, their championships now. With the Panthers now, it's just, now you're seeing that root fan base growing now. Like, the foundation is set. And like, it's huge for them.
You're right. And why I'm interested to see what the attendance is moving forward, because this year, I didn't at the end of the year, maybe you did, Kirby, or any of you guys, see where the Panthers rated in attendance, but they had to be top 5 for sure, top 10. And again, they had to win. Like, one thing that I love now is I've been there long enough. I got people coming up to me in Sawgrass Mills before the game at the mall, and they wanted, or even at the rink, telling me their stories. Like yourself, you just said, Cody, lifelong Panther fan, or forever, however long, or what'd you say, 20-year Panther fan? I've had a lot of people tell me they were worried the team was going to move. They're like, we thought we were going to be the Arizona Coyotes.
Quebec was the big one, Ron.
We were going to be in Nordiques.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kirby.
Yeah, Quebec was the big one for me, being a 30-year fan. People forget that. I'm like, Kirby, why do you hate the Montreal Canadiens so much? And, that province of Quebec, me being in Canada, like, they were like trying to take ownership of that team and taking over the building. And even as much as security and ushers allowing them to do it. And some of the stories I've heard, Rod, like with fans just overtaking the arena and you're kind of outnumbered, you go to the concession area, you go to the washrooms, just some real horror stories that I've heard over the years from fans. And, being a lifelong fan trying to defend this team up here, Rod, you said it earlier, it's like we have a lot of Canadians on this roster and people don't even realize, I think even locally, people don't realize how many Canadians are on this roster, how many Finnish players are on this roster, and how much fans that we have listening to us, that have listening to you, Rod, that, are global, right? And that's a big thing with our brand, trying to create that global brand. And the only way you can create it is when you start winning.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So listen, nobody knows, that doesn't really matter, but I also am a mental health and addiction recovery coach. And when I talk to people that have battled addiction, it's like, you can't enjoy the light unless you've enjoyed the dark. So you've been through the shitty times of addiction. Let's enjoy not being in addiction. For the Panthers, you've almost lost your team. You were the joke of the NHL, let's be honest, with the attendance. You were. And people still have that chip on their shoulder. Trust me, they do.
6 fans.
Yeah, it came up in the playoffs. But I'm like, guys, you got to now get over that. Enjoy this Stanley Cup. I was just on the South Florida Tribune podcast the other night, and I'm like, Cody, have you realized? Nick, too, Kirby, you guys have left that group of franchises without a Stanley Cup. That is a shitty group to be in. You're not in it anymore.
Like, for years, we were in the same breath as like the Columbus Blue Jackets for like the least like successful franchise, because prior to 2022, we didn't even have a playoff series win. Like, Kirby at least saw the cup run. Me and Nick had nothing. We went years of just relying on Stephen Weiss, Chris Versteeg, Nick Bukestad, who led the team in points, like with 37 points or something.
I also remember in those the late 2010s, like, Huberdeau and Barkov, we kind of went through the cycle of coaches. We had Gallant, Tom Rowe, Bob Bubner, Joel Quenneville, and I'm like thinking, after going through all of that, I really started down to like, is this going to work, right? It just seemed like, you had the guys in like Barkov and Huberdeau, and, that's part of journey as a fan. It's like that doubt. I remember thinking after we got swept by Tampa Bay, and I'm like, I don't know if this core, like, there was a lot of talk about that amongst the Panther fan base. Like, can this core get it done? And I started to really doubt. I'm like, I don't know if we're ever going to get the cup. Like, you see comparisons, even to like this year, you see comparisons to like what Washington did up until they won the cup, or what even San Jose was for many years. They were always right there contending, and they never got that cup, right? And now they're rebuilding. So all those thoughts come into your head, and when you finally win one, right, as you said, Rod, seeing your name come off that graphic with no teams, with no Stanley Cup.
Rod said too, Nick, like I was putting ourselves in the Detroit Lions camp, Pittsburgh Pirates, like the worst franchises, Rod, in North American sports was what the Panthers were in up to the 3.
Guys, I don't think it's hit Panthers fans yet.
No,
we're sitting here I don't think it's hit them yet.
I don't think it was a banner night. Like, but piggybacking off of this, and like, Rod, you cover both the Bolts and the Cats. Now this is a question like I've been pondering for the last 2 years. The changing of the guard with Florida hockey now, because the Lightning had dominated for years, and I mean, they killed us. I mean, they had the cup win way back in 04 versus Calgary. And then, they had like the run in 15, then the back-to-back cups. Now Florida's starting to take over that mantle as Florida's team. And you see like Tampa making this, in my opinion, the shocking move of the offseason, Stamkos going to Nashville. And I saw him in the jersey. It don't look right. I'm glad he's out of the division because he's killed us for years, but good Lord, does that not look right? How do you think the guard is going to change more, or do you see Tampa making kind of like a little bit more of a push now with Gensel in the fold?
I'm sorry, but they're done. They're on a slide, and I don't even think they're going to make the playoffs this upcoming season. I mean, it's still July. I'm not joking.
I could definitely see what you're talking about. Very top heavy.
Yes, and it's a culture thing. None of us know, I don't think, what it's doing to that dressing room Stamkos is gone. But I don't think it's good. How could it be? How could it be? Guys, Kirby, I want to hear from you on this too. I know you're the Panthers guy, but you got thoughts on this. When the Panthers eliminated the Lightning in 5 games this spring, at the end, John Cooper sat in the news conference in Sunrise. I was sitting in the room, and he was asked about Stamkos. And John Cooper goes, he belongs here. I don't expect this to be a long negotiation or a long conversation. That party was right. I don't think it was a long conversation. Steven, we're offering you $3 million a year, and he was out.
Yeah.
What does that do to a franchise?
You see the divergence between, the former GM, Steve Yzerman that's on Detroit, and Brisebois that's in Tampa now. So I think a lot of that was, what you said. You were in the room with John Cooper there, and I'm not the biggest John Cooper guy, but I respect his winning, his pedigree, and he's going to be like coach of Team Canada and all that, my nation here. So, I think there's a bit of a difference of opinion there where we've seen with Bill Zito and Maurice. We don't know it a lot because Zito keeps his cards close to his vest, but they've worked really well in conjunction of what, sometimes Zito has given, Paul Maurice these diamonds in the rough, but sometimes he's given guys like, hey, make something out of Mark Stahl, make something out of Dmitry Kulikov. And Paul Maurice has been able to do that. And that's what he was criticized for in Winnipeg, of not giving those younger guys, a bigger role, like you see with Anton Lundell now. A lot of our fan base was being critical of that. And it's so weird now, Rod, to see that on the other side perspective, like what's Tampa Bay going to do now? They've lost some of these guys, like, the Ross Coltons. They've lost some of those, heart and soul guys, as much as we hated them, but the Patrick Maroons and Corey Perrys. And now you take away the guy out of their locker room. Of course, they have Braden Point that we love, Cody. We give respect towards Victor Hedman, Vasilevsky, but they're taking the fabric out of that room. And yes, he is aging, Cody, but what is this team going to be? I do have them around third to wild card, but for what Rod said, that's a bit of a hot take,
it's just this offseason for them was just so confusing. It wasn't like Stamkos leaving, but the Sergachev trade made it worse for me. That one made zero sense. Yep. It made zero sense because you bring back McDonough and then you offload Sergachev. Like, that was Hedman's heir apparent. And the funny thing was, when we're talking about Steven Stamkos, we all watched the series. He was Tampa's best player in that series.
Scored a goal a game.
Yep.
He was good 5-on-5, Rod.
And everybody else, they didn't put up much of a fight. No, Stammer did.
Kucherov was MIA. Point was just suffocated. Like, Point was trying, but he was suffocated. Florida just shut down like any star player they went against outside McDavid. Those two games, they shut them down.
I would say Kucherov was shut down from Barkov, Forsling, and Ekblad, and Point was shut down from Mikkola and Monter. Like, we did a really good job collectively, and our third pairing, Cody, was good throughout the playoffs.
And Game 4 was just pure desperation out of Tampa, where you saw guys like Hagel come through. Like, Hagel had a huge Game 4, and Vasi made the saves that he really didn't make in games, the first 3 games of that series. But I don't want to call him dead yet. It's just that's just the past in me. But if you call him dead, you could call him dead. I'm not calling him dead till they're dead.
Yeah, I'm like, hey Rod, I'm like the sleeping bear with Tavares when we played Toronto last year. I was like, I don't want to wake that sleeping bear because I remember what he did with the New York Islanders against us. So it's one of those things, Rod, with Tampa. But jump in there, Rod, and then Nick.
Well, no. They're not going to be in the draft lottery. Yeah, they're not going to be terrible. I see them like the Penguins.
Like Pittsburgh was?
You just said it. You just said
Pittsburgh 2 years ago?
Penguins. Well, they've missed the playoffs the last 2 years. Yeah. And they still have Crosby and Malkin and Carlson and
Letang.
The gang. Letang, thank you. They got all those guys, and they're missing the playoffs. You can't just rely on those guys. So, again, culture. And I love being now in the South Florida hockey culture where I get the nicknames now. JBB, Julian Brisebois, JBB. I don't see how the fans don't see this. When John Cooper says this and he goes and does the opposite, that tells me they're disjointed. And you brought up Kirby, Zito, and Paul Maurice. Listen, now we're starting to get into something here because everybody's been partying for a month, and I get it. But let's just look back. You don't think Bill Zito and Paul Maurice sat back at the trade deadline and said, do we need this guy? Yeah. Do we need this guy? No. It just seemed like they worked in concert with each other, and it took them a while to figure it out. Remember that night where was it, Kirby? Was it Montreal after the game? I think Montreal, where the Panthers got bombed, and Pomo stood in front of the cameras. He's like, everybody relax. Remember that? I'm like, nobody's talking about that anymore.
Yeah, and one signing that I think points to your point, Rod, the Nate Schmidt signing. because Nate Schmidt, his first year in Winnipeg, was under Paul Maurice on 20 minutes a night, and he was really good for them. Like,
he's a great defenseman.
Yep. And I just feel like, like me and Kirby and Nick, we all try and identify Maurice guys. Like, we lost one this offseason in Kevin Stenlund, who we all thought was a Maurice guy.
Brandon Montour.
Montour as well. Kirby's got to throw him in there because, Money Montour propaganda is going to stay, even though he's in Seattle.
I'm watching Seattle this year, Cody. You know it.
Nick, we need to help. Oh, we're screwed if Seattle does good.
I'll be watching Seattle. I'll probably be watching Toronto too.
Look, there's no team I won't watch. So
yeah, Utah with Stanley and Sergachev that we just mentioned. There's a lot of compelling storylines that kind of interconnect with Florida and the state of Florida here.
Yep.
So, Stamkos and Nashville. But yeah, Cody and then Nick, you guys got anything here?
I just wanted to ask one thing, going back to the Stamkos point. I've seen a lot of people talking on Twitter. Over the last couple of years, we've seen the term cutthroat. Teams need to be cutthroat, the kind of what Vegas did with Marc-Andre Fleury, what the Penguins, who we just mentioned, avoided doing with guys like Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang. I just wanted to get your thoughts on, those parallels and maybe how this situation might be similar or different in a way.
It doesn't make any sense the way they did this. Nick, to me, you asked my opinion, it's a culture thing. And that's why I think Tampa's on the slide now, because you don't treat your people that way. You don't treat a franchise icon that way. That's all. You can see how hurt he is. Cody said that Stamkos doesn't look right in that Panthers golf shirt in front of the Panthers backline. It doesn't. Why would you do that? It's not about cutthroat. It's not about money. Yeah, he had to move everything around, but Jake Gensel is not a heart and soul drafted Tampa Bay Lightning guy. And at the time when the move was made, and on July 1st, I put on our daily talk show that I do, I said, when you get rid of your heart and soul, you get rid of your heart and soul. That gutted the Lightning. Yeah. So was it about money? What about, you could have found a way. And I don't know why they didn't.
Yeah. Like,
Cody, anything closing?
Just like piggybacking off that point. It's just, I can parallel to another sport. Freddie Freeman leaving the Braves for the Dodgers. It has that type of feel to it where, they still have other guys that can offset it, but they ain't the same team. It's different dynamic. Like, cause here's the thing, me and Kirby and all three of us are huge in locker room dynamic. And, and back to the trade deadline, where it's Maurice and Zito working together. They could have got Pacioretty if they wanted to. It was between Pacioretty and Okposo. And they went with Okposo because they felt like he was the better fit for the locker room because there's a bunch of guys he knew, because he knew Reinhart from Buffalo, Rodriguez from Buffalo, Kulikov from Buffalo too, if I'm not mistaken. And it's just that kind of dynamic. And it's like I said, I'm not going to call him dead till they're dead, but the Stamkos thing is just you look at him, he doesn't seem like he's super excited to be there. His heart's still in Tampa. You can't tell me otherwise with that. Yeah.
Oh, JBB's got a lot to prove now.
Yeah.
That was a ballsy move. And the owner, Vinnick, obviously let him run the team how you want. Better be the right move.
Yeah, because if it don't work out, 2 years tops, I'm giving them.
Before we let you go here today, Rod, I want to thank you for your time. Awesome to come on here, especially our video portion. If you guys are listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure to jump over our YouTube channel, subscribe there. So we've got the video going up now. We're going to be doing some fun things ahead here with our community. But Rod, anything to plug here on the way out?
No, we're daily on the air, noon Eastern on Game Plus Television. It's the Rod Pedersen Show. We do a lot of NHL talk there, but also a lot of CFL for Cody. He might want to tune in.
Yes, I get to learn how the sport even works.
Yeah, and the Rouge, exactly. And Cats and Bolts, the podcast we started last September, is going well. My wife and I cover it. Serena and I, Cats and Bolts podcast. Give us a follow on social media. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity to chat with you guys. I'd like you to come on ours. We do it in studio in Boca Raton. So if anybody's in the area, Cody, maybe we'll get you up there. We love talking Florida NHL hockey, and
it would be an honor.
Yeah, it's a great thing.
Yeah, but once again, we appreciate it. Once again, like I read your story, did my research. You're a huge inspiration to a lot of people because seeing what you bounce back from And like I have a kind of like a dream to be in like this kind of like broadcasting spot, and like for me, just a guy to look up to you is just very huge, and like huge inspiration. Where you came from, how you bounced back, and everything, and to where you're at. It's just a whole amazing story.
Thank you for the kind words, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
And as always, on the way out, we want to thank Rod for his time here today. Let's go, Cats.